Hey there guys, Music Fan here. How you guys doing? Today is the 19th of May, and on this particular day, to the day, last year in 2014 was the North American release of this particular album, Ghost Stories by Coldplay. And so this is kind of going to be kind of like a proper album review / retrospective 1 year anniversary, if you're living in the United States at least, retrospective video about Coldplay's Ghost Stories. And so let's not wait. I wasted a lot of time trying to make this album review over the year. I think the last time I was attempting to film this kind of video was in November, but I wasn't really satisfied with my articulation. I was not happy with the way I expressed my thoughts and my words in that initial review. So even though, yes, this is a kind of a year late album review, and I'm very, very sorry about that. Let's also take this also as a retrospective, as a look back and see how this album has aged within a year. Is it still a fantastic Coldplay album, or has it diminished in stature with time, even at least with me, in this particular sense? So let's not waste any more time. Now, this album, if there's one word I can use to describe this particular album, it would have to be intimacy. This album is completely intimate, especially when you compare it to Milo Xyloto, which in comparison, it's like comparing like a small art theater with a giant boom, like a speaker destroying IMAX theater. Milo Xyloto, compared with Ghost Stories, was a bigger album with a much more grandiose approach musically and lyrically. It was full of very beautiful, very just colorful guitar melodies from Johnny Buckland, which is full of just grandiose and epic music that really gave all those songs of that particular album a color. It was also a lot more electro pop in its sound, and it was also a lot more lyrical based, in the sense that there was more of a story behind the lyrics of that particular album. In comparison, though, Ghost Stories is way more restrained, and Ghost Stories is a lot more intimate in its approach, and dare I say also it's a lot more gloomy and moodier than Milo Xyloto. And then the reason for that is, quite obviously, as you guys know, in case you don't know, is the fact that Gwyneth Paltrow and frontman Chris Martin, who they've been married for about a decade, had announced their separation in spring of last year, in 2014, prior to this album release. They had called it like conscious uncoupling, and that they were separating each other from each other that particular time. And those events inform the lyrical writing on this album, which is a lot more darker and is a little bit more reflective and introspective than Milo Xyloto, or probably any Coldplay release since Parachutes, I have to say. The lyrical writing informs more of a person going through a sense of emotional turmoil after a really grand loss, like a huge pain of loss with this particular person. And as he goes along in this journey of trying to reconcile his feelings towards his new reality, these songs inform that journey in various different ways through a lot of different moods. Musically, it's a lot more synth pop driven. Well, Milo Xyloto was also synth pop driven, but this one is also synth pop driven, except in comparison with Milo Xyloto, this one is a little bit more heavy on the atmospheres, a little bit more heavy on the ambient side of the synth pop spectrum or of the electronic spectrum. It's also a little more electronic than prior Coldplay releases. I mean, Milo 2 was also electronic, but this album, instead of using electronic as a way to blow up the sound, instead Coldplay uses the electronic influence to kind of create the mood, to create the atmosphere, and to create the very introspective and gloomy, maybe not so much gloomy actually, but more introspective atmosphere within these songs. You have tracks like Always in My Head, which is just full of this like ambient, almost dark ambient quality to it, almost kind of like a very synth driven, but yet conveying the sense of like something bad or something really tragic had just happened, and this is the person coming out of realizing that. And also tracks here like Magic and Ink and True Love, which exhibit almost a hip-hop influence, especially the track Magic, which ironically enough I was going to do a track review of that album last year, but I just didn't have the time to. Magic, especially in the sense, is more reminiscent of Coldplay of older Coldplay, but instead it takes electronic, this pulsing beat, and just kind of like takes it all and tries to bring it to a climax and then brings it right back down. That's another thing about this particular album, is that just when you think these songs are about to build into a climactic epic quality, then Coldplay takes it right back down to how the song first sounded when you first listened to it. It's quite a new skill in restraint. That's the other thing about, well, most of the songs of this album is that this album is a lot more unassuming, where Milo Xyloto was a little bit more assertive in its musical bombast and its electronics. This one is a little bit more restrained in these songs. Tracks like Oceans, which really harbors this sense of loss, this sense of like wanting this lover to come back, but realizing that it's not going to happen. And it's probably the most moodiest track on this album, amongst other moody tracks. Midnight, the track, the first of this album that came out. I did make a track review of this album last year. If you want to check it out, check the description box below. But Midnight also too exuberates Coldplay's more Radiohead influence on them. Like, I mean, this is probably the most dynamic track off this whole album, in the sense that, like, with its ice cold production and its brooding atmosphere. Really, the only track that stands out is the track Sky Full of Stars, which when it came out became a huge, gigantic hit. It was a collaboration between Coldplay and French dance producer Avicii. And even though this track stands out like a sore thumb, it still suits the collections of these particular songs, the atmosphere, when you take them as a package, as a whole, in the sense that it offers a sense of like euphoric climax in the acceptance of this particular situation. And the dance music here is just simply amazing. Still to this day, I still love this song. It's probably personally my favorite song off this whole album. Really, my least favorite song here would have to be the track Another's Arms. This one I think also, like the track True Love, I think might have been a collaboration between Coldplay and hip-hop producer Timbaland. But Another's Arms really is a track that I like in general, but it's a track that I really don't care for that much. And I do listen to it every once in a while when I'm listening to this album in full, but this track here is just, I don't know what it is about this track, but something about this song just doesn't meld with me. I just don't gravitate towards this song as much as the other ones, and it's I think I would have chosen other songs like the B-side, All Your Friends. I think that's a much better, in my opinion at least, a much better inclusion between Midnight and Oceans in this sense, but again, my opinion. But that is my least favorite track off this album, although it does suit the narrative a little more nicely. So yeah, this album is a completely different departure for Coldplay, especially in the time of its release. And I think if I were to give this album a rating, I would give it a solid 4.5 out of 5. This is really an album that Coldplay really embraces intimacy, but approaches it in a much different musical approach than they would with Parachutes. It's actually the most intimate Coldplay album in their catalog since the first album, Parachutes. That they return to that sense of intimacy, of like in their lyrical writing and in their musicality, even though there are, in comparison with Parachutes, they have to have communicated that intimacy more with the instruments that they had at hand. This time, however, there's more things and more producers available to them at this point. They have synthesizers and beat effects, they have electronic effects available at their disposals, and producers like Timbaland, and also Paul Epsworth, who was also a producer at hand on this album. And really, I compare this album to Kanye West's 808s and Heartbreaks and Adele's 21 in their approach to brooding and very more intimate music in this sense, and even though this album may not be remembered that well down the line, I think this album still, at least in my mind, remains a very vital Coldplay release, in the sense that it is a return to the Coldplay of old, in a way, except now they bring all these different influences that they have accumulated over the years, and kind of apply it to their sound. Don't go to this album expecting tracks like a Shiver, or tracks like Clocks, or tracks like what's the Speed of Sound. Don't expect to go into this album with that, but expect an experience. If you haven't heard this album already, this is what I'm telling you to expect. Expect an overall experience. Expect a journey into the pain of loss, and also coming out the other side in complete acceptance, as is with the finishing track, Oh, which is a piano ballad. So overall, this album is a 4.5 out of 5. This is definitely, in my opinion, the best Coldplay album in a long time. And it remains to be seen what's going to happen with Coldplay in the next upcoming album. Supposedly, the title, A Head Full of Dreams, supposed to be coming out this year of 2015, and supposed to be the last Coldplay album ever. I'm not entirely sure if that's the case. I really hope it's not, because I am not finished with Coldplay at all. But again, it will remain to be seen what that album sounds like and how that album will pan out, and I definitely will be reviewing that particular album. So this has been a retrospective review of this particular album, and tell me what you think of this album. Do you still love it? Has it grown with you this past year, or has it decreased in playability with you? And tell me what you think of this album in the comments below. And this has been a retrospective / review of Coldplay's Ghost Stories, and this is Mr. Music Fan. I will see you later. Take care.